The Giants are big game hunting this winter. Obviously, their top target right now is Aaron Judge. We've also we've heard them connected to guys like Carlos Correa. But what happens if the Giants miss out on all the top guys? What is going to be the fan reaction? We'll get to those questions, that question, and so much more next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, more mailbag questions. We have like 60 plus questions, so thank you so much to everyone who participates on Twitter. We did this yesterday, talking a lot about Aaron Judge, and now some of the questions continue to be about Aaron Judge, which is kind of related to this first one, coming from Checkbook Wiggs, who says, how upset, I'm paraphrasing here, will Giants fans be if they don't sign a big name? And I mean, this is a pretty obvious answer, but fans will be upset. And it's because it's not like they've been secretive about their intention to land a big fish. Like I said, like clearly their top target is Aaron Judge. It's not just reading the tea leaves on this. We've had, many reporters in the know are very clear that their top target is Aaron Judge. And so it's very possible that they miss out on Judge, and then that in and of itself would cause a huge, I think, reaction among Giants fans. Especially, I was just thinking about this yesterday, like really thinking about it. I think if he goes back to the Yankees, people will, in a way, understand. But if he goes to any other team, that's when there's going to be an uproar. Particularly, what if he went to the Dodgers? If Aaron Judge were to sign with the Dodgers, then fans would lose their minds. Absolutely. And I wouldn't blame them. And it's hard to envision a scenario in which that happens, because it's just a lot of different factors would go into that wouldn't necessarily make the most sense. So it would be some kind of crazy contract, maybe short term, just insanely high pay over a somewhat shorter term. So I don't think that's likely, but man, the fan reaction to that would be insane. But let's say they miss out on Judge, say he goes to New York or something, and then also all these shortstops fall off the board. This is kind of how last offseason went on the position player side. I kept thinking and hoping that they were going to end up with a big name, and the last big name was Trevor Story, and the Giants were in fact connected to him, and Alex Pavlovich reported that they made a legitimate attempt to try to sign Trevor Story, but he ends up going to Boston, and that was it. Everybody, musical chairs was over and the Giants were not sitting in a chair. And what if that happens again? People will be upset, but I just think that they're going to do what it takes to not let that happen. And even if it did happen, there's always trades as well. Like you have maybe somewhat more control over the trade market, or at least it's a different market that you can go down if the need arises. But that's why I think they ought to be and potentially will be aggressive with their top targets, who I think right now are Aaron Judge and Carlos Correa. I don't know if those two would both be targets, but I know that if they were to miss on Judge, Alex Pavlovich of NBC Sports Bay Area, again, very clearly stating in recent days and weeks that he knows for a fact that Carlos Correa is their top target among the shortstop class. And I don't blame them. I agree. He's the guy that I've circled as the top shortstop target for the Giants. So we'll see, but fan reaction would not be good at all. It would be a nuclear meltdown type reaction. Next question comes from Dr. Barry Twinklecave, who says, I keep seeing on Twitter that our Giants are very close to bringing Kenley Jansen in to be an eighth inning guy. Any truth to this? I keep seeing 2 years, 25 million. By the way, also, I think we add Judge, then a lot more free agents will want to sign knowing how much better he makes the Giants. Yeah, that's a good point. And you could say the same thing, like if you add Correa, then that could entice Judge to sign. So just bringing in talent causes players who are skeptical about your chances of winning to you ease those concerns a little bit. And so, yeah, obviously by signing Judge, they would have an easier time bringing in other players. But in terms of the Kenley Jansen rumors, really weird. Right at the non-tender deadline a couple Fridays ago now, there were a couple of reports that the Giants were in discussions with Kenley Jansen on a 2-year deal. John Morosi and somebody else from the Dodgers, someone who covers the Dodgers, reporting this. And then we haven't really heard anything ever since. And so you say, Dr. Barry Twinkle Cave, that you keep seeing the Giants are very close. I have not seen very close. I've seen that they're discussing, and that was it. It was just that one day on Friday, a couple Fridays ago, that they were discussing a 2-year deal. So it could have been something like we talked about yesterday, planted by an agent, right? You can just, if the Dodgers are interested, you maybe throw out a rumor that the Giants are interested and they're going 2 years. Maybe the Dodgers are only trying to get them on 1 year. And so you throw something like that out there. Unfortunately, that kind of stuff does happen. So the fact that we haven't heard anything ever since, I'm 50-50 on whether I even believe there's any truth to that report, but I have not heard that they're very close with Kenley Jansen, but it's something to certainly keep an eye on. He hasn't signed with anybody, so we'll see. Cobert Gobert says, what are your thoughts on the Giants' usages of platoons since Kapler's hire in 2020? Have they overused platoons or underused platoons with which players? Also share your thoughts on the following quote on platooning by Gabe Kapler. So yes, this quote is, and I saw this at the time, from a piece in The Athletic by Andy Baggerly. The context was Baggerly asked him, like, hey, you used 152 lineups in 162 games. Brandon Crawford was your only player who made more than 100 starts at a specific position. And Kapler said, quote, I think it's nice when you have a lineup that you can run out there every single day, but openly and honestly, I love the challenge of putting the puzzle pieces together, especially on the position player side. There are a lot of ways to skin a cat, but I really like our platoon system, and I really appreciate, like, just rolling out a ton of lefties against a righty at the end of a game. It's fun, end quote. And so when I read this, it didn't sit right with me. I didn't really like this statement at all. And the reason, I mean, just to answer your question in order, do they overuse or underuse platoons? They certainly don't underuse platoons. They, if anything, overuse platoons. But yeah, I think they overuse them, but it's not like Kapler's fault. That's the thing. The answer is not play Jock Peterson every day. The answer is have more everyday players. Jock Peterson, I've said this before, but if you look up platoon player in the dictionary, there might be a picture of Jock Peterson's face, like, along with the definition. So the problem was that they didn't have guys kind of prove worthy of being everyday players. And Peterson, it's a long track record. You're not just going to suddenly think that, oh, he's changed his ways of hundreds and hundreds of plate appearances of a sample. And so, look, the reality is you can't platoon at every spot. Right now in the NL, you don't have a pitcher hitting, so there's 9 different lineup spots. And if you have 2 players for every spot, that would be 18 position players on a 26-man roster, and that just doesn't happen. And so I think platooning is fine, and it's honestly like you're going to get the best performance out of a team if you do it in your spots that warrant it. But at the same time, what they really desperately need is, like, as Farhan Zaidi literally said at some point last season, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 everyday players. He said 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And hopefully more like 4 or 5 as opposed to 2 or 3, just like real everyday players who are not platoon players. And if you platoon the rest, it doesn't really create so much angst, I think, because in my opinion, they did overuse them. And I just didn't like Kapler talking about how fun it is, because it wasn't a fun season and this is what they were doing. And so I'd like to hear more like the answer I just gave, which is that it's fine for some spots, but we need to have more players kind of step in and be those everyday players, which you literally need, like I said, because you can't have 18 position players on your roster. It just doesn't work. Anyway, coming up in just a minute, we're going to get to more questions and answers. We're going to talk about Unloading Tommy La Stella, is that a possibility? Could they possibly make a trade, and what would that look like? We'll get into it in just a second, but before we do, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at BetOnline, including MLB offseason odds. Aaron Judge to the Giants if he leaves New York at plus 200. The implied odds of plus 200 are 33.3%. I think that's an opportunity because, again, this is assuming he leaves New York. This bet only kind of processes if he leaves New York. So if he goes back to the Yankees, it's canceled. But if he leaves New York, those implied odds are only a third to the Giants and 2/3 to the field, every other team, not the Yankees or the Giants. And I just don't think that's right. It could be, I could be, looking at this with my orange colored glasses, but I really do believe it would be at least 50% Giants. That's my opinion. Could be wrong, but anyway, those are the implied odds, and you can look at those. And then Carlos Correa has some implied odds as well to the Giants at about 14%. I think maybe that's more realistic. But if Judge were to sign with the Yankees or something, I would immediately put the Giants higher on the Correa probability. So these are just some of the things you can check out at BetOnline, where it's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Okay, more questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. So yes, more questions. I hope I answered that one thoroughly enough. You said which players. I mean, it would take me too long to go through. I think you and I know which players are platooned enough and which should be platooned less or more or whatever. Anyway, Mr. Smart ASS says, what is another realistic bad contract swap you foresee regarding unloading La Stella? I have a hard time believing Giants will just DFA him, considering they hate eating that sort of money. Do Giants attach a top prospect to unload him? $11.5 million goes a long way. So I actually have a lot of thoughts on this question. First of all, it's a sunk cost. Like, they really shouldn't factor in what they're paying him at all. And so I know that there's been some conversation about this, but I'm not so sure that goes into it as much as people think, because they're paying him regardless. Like, it doesn't matter. It's already committed. So they shouldn't make their decision based on that. I think it's more like they don't make these commitments to players unless they believe that the talent is in there somewhere. And so for La Stella, I think they continue to think like if they can just get him to be healthier, that he could actually perform up to the standards that they expected of him when they signed him to this deal, which is heavily backloaded. It's not like they've been paying him $11.5 million a year. It was a total like 18 point something $million deal, and 11.5 a 3-year deal, and 11.5 of it owed this upcoming season. So very backloaded. And you say another realistic bad contract swap. I think I already answered this question, so maybe you're asking me for someone else. I believe I mentioned Yasmani Grandal. I don't necessarily have an answer for you today. I think I wanted to say Grandal, but now I'm realizing maybe you wanted somebody else. Grandal is a catcher. The White Sox have another catcher who I think they'd like to give some playing time to. Younger guy, performed well. Sebi Zavala, I think is his name. And I don't know, Grandal is interesting, but it would create a ripple effect with Joey Bart and blah, blah, blah. But he's owed about $18 million. If you could just flip La Stella, White Sox are too right-handed. They also have an opening at second base. La Stella playing second on the White Sox for Grandal, you'd just be paying an extra like $6 million or so, $7 million, I guess. And he did not play well in 2022, but has a track record of being one of the better offensive catchers in the game, has a track record of, playing under Farhan Zaidi when he was the GM of the Dodgers. So I just think that's a somewhat logical fit, but it depends on if the Giants are trying to upgrade at catcher, which I think they ought to do if they're really trying to contend in 2023. So I don't have any more guys to mention just now, but in terms of would they attach a top prospect to unload him, 11.5 million goes a long way. I think absolutely not. That would be a horrible idea. Some teams do such things, like the Angels in a trade with the Giants with Zach Cozart. It was kind of a very similar situation, but only teams that are like reluctant to spend money should do that. And I think some of you are thinking that's the Giants. Well, no, they should absolutely not attach a top prospect just to shed $11.5 million. I think that would be horrible for fans. If they did such a thing, I would roast them mercilessly on the podcast because there's just no reason to do such a thing. That there's no salary cap in baseball. It'd be one thing if like clearing space allowed you to do something that you just literally couldn't do because there was a cap. But there's no cap. There's just these thresholds that if you pass them, you start getting taxed. And there's 3 or 4 now different tiers that if you pass these thresholds, you get taxed more and more heavily. But the Giants are nowhere even near the first thresholds. They're not taxed at all on any of their spending. And so this would just be, if they do this, I will totally roast them for it. And roast isn't even, I will bury them for this. Okay. Next question, I think I made my point, comes from SF Giants Jake, who says, thoughts on trading for Michael A. Taylor as a fallback option to play center field if they miss on Nimmo, Bellinger, etc. So, I don't like it. I personally just have always kind of thought that Michael A. Taylor was an overrated player. I understand that he's good, very good defensively, but he's never really hit. He has a career 80 weighted runs created plus. If you look at the numbers, defensive runs saved, 19 defensive runs saved in each of the last 2 seasons in center field. So I hear you. I mean, maybe I'm sleeping a little bit on Michael A. Taylor, but the problem is with these other guys like Cody Bellinger even, you're getting the potential for more offense. With Michael A. Taylor, like he is just consistently significantly below average offensively. And I don't know. Somebody asked, and we're actually planning to get to that question, could Bryce Johnson do what Cody Bellinger does? And I think more so even, Bryce Johnson could potentially do what Michael A. Taylor does. And Steven Duggar could have done what Michael A. Taylor does. And Mauricio Dubon could have done what Michael A. Taylor does. There's just not a lot of ceiling there. There is really good defense. But with like a Kevin Kiermaier, I get he's kind of the same. He's actually been a significantly better hitter in his career than Michael A. Taylor. I feel like we lump Kevin Kiermaier into this category like horrible offense, but he's been more average than horrible. And he's also been a better base runner and a better defender even, I think, than Michael A. Taylor historically. So I like a lot of guys before I like Michael A. Taylor. He's just a no-bat player, and I just don't have a lot of interest in that. Anyway, coming up in just a minute, more questions and answers. We're going to talk about the qualifying offer and whether these players, a lot of top free agents are tagged with the qualifying offer. Does that affect what the Giants are going to do? Because there's a penalty for signing these guys. So who has the qualifying offer, and will it influence the Giants' moves this winter? In just a second. But first, all right, as promised, we're going to talk a little bit about players who have the qualifying offer and if it will affect the Giants' offseason plans. Another question from Cobert Gobert, who says, what role do you think the top free agent talent tagged with the qualifying offer has on Giants' free agency? They have yet to sign a player who has rejected a qualifying offer from other teams. Do you think they valued the draft picks that much, or is there something more at play? Yeah, I don't think it's that they value the draft picks that much that they're just like unwilling to sign a player who receives a qualifying offer. Certainly if you're more of a mid-tier player, I think that's whose markets are hurt the most by being tagged with the qualifying offer. Like Jock Peterson, he would have been negatively affected in a pretty significant way probably because teams just aren't willing to give up that pick when they feel like you're kind of a dime a dozen. Not that Peterson is a dime a dozen, but they can just sign somebody else who doesn't have the qualifying offer. But when it's the top echelon talent, then you're willing to do it. Like Aaron Judge got the qualifying offer. It's not slowing the Giants down at all from their pursuit, nor should it. I mean, it's really not that these picks are not that valuable. They're worth maybe a few $1,000,000 to some teams, but arguably less than that to other teams. It depends on whether you're that reliant on the draft to kind of build out your roster. But I mean, guys who received the qualifying offer include Aaron Judge, Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, Dansby Swanson, Jacob deGrom, Brandon Nimmo, Wilson Contreras, Chris Bassett. I think guys like Bassett, Nathan Eovaldi, a lot of these other guys already signed or accepted the qualifying offer. Martin Perez, Jock Peterson, Anthony Rizzo, Tyler Anderson. So those are the guys, and then Carlos Rodon. But the Giants obviously wouldn't have to surrender a pick for signing Rodon because they would be the beneficiaries. It doesn't work that way. But I think it makes it less likely, Colbert, that they're going to sign like Judge and Bogaerts and Nimmo and Contreras and deGrom. Like, they're not going to sign 6 or even probably 2 or 3 qualifying offer players, but it wouldn't stop them from signing a player they like a lot, like Aaron Judge. And also notably, Carlos Correa is one of the rare top talents out there who doesn't have a qualifying offer attached to him. Neither does Justin Verlander. And yeah, I just think it factors in, but it's not that big of a deal. But it especially hurts more of the mid-tier players like Chris Bassett. I don't see the Giants. They could just sign their other starting pitchers who are quality pitchers who don't have the qualifying offer. And so I think it will hurt a guy like Bassett, and he might end up being one of these guys who has to wait pretty long to sign. We'll see. So the next question from Jerry. Speaking of Carlos Rodon, Jerry says, Rodon signing, likelihood. I think it's about a similar situation as Kevin Gausman last year, which I thought was somewhat likely. And I wanted them to sign Kevin Gausman, and then he didn't sign, and then he said they never made him an offer. So I don't really see why this would be any different. I don't totally understand the logic. Like, I'd like to know, there's obviously a reason that they didn't make Kevin Gausman an offer. And I mean, I just am operating under the assumption it's about the duration of the deal that he was going to get, that it was 5 years, and they don't want to do that, guarantee 5 years to a starting pitcher who's going to be, going into his mid-30s. And so for Rodon, he's going to be entering his age 30 season in 2023. They obviously like him a lot. They liked him enough to give him the deal that they gave him, but I'm not sure they want to make that commitment. Rodon is almost certain, I would say, to get a 5 or even possibly 6-year contract. 5 may be more likely, but I wouldn't be totally shocked if he got 6. So the odds of a signing, I don't know. I have 20% would be maybe an optimistic viewpoint. 15%. It's 10 to 20% would kind of be where I land on the odds of Rodon signing. He's going to have a lot of teams interested. Reportedly, the Rangers are very interested. He's meeting with the Mets, apparently. So I wouldn't expect it. But I think they will come away with a really good starting pitcher, whether it's through trade or through free agency or whatever the case is. Jamie says, what is Farhan waiting for? Be aggressive and go get the guys you want. I understand this viewpoint. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Sometimes you make an offer and the player just wants to entertain other offers. Like, I think a counter response you might give is like, then just blow him away with your offer. And that's fair. But I do just want to point out, it's not like players are really falling off the board here. Like, almost nobody of significance, like at the top of the market, certainly has signed. And the winter meetings are starting in less than a week. And I think that's when we may ultimately see Aaron Judge sign. And so I get your point, but also you could say that to the whole league. It's not just the Giants. And we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Lucky says 2023 payroll number. This is a good question. I don't know what I would set the over-under at. I might set it at, 179.5 or something. And I'm taking the over. I've been possibly burned by this before. I thought that their payroll would go up in 2022, but it didn't really from 2021. And I don't know, like they're already at a somewhat high number. Like when you factor in the deal they gave to Peterson and the arbitration estimates and buyouts and all that, they come out to 122 million, and that's not factoring in pre-arbitration players. And Roster Resource on Fangraphs takes a stab at predicting what the pre-arbitration salaries will add up to be, and they have the Giants' payroll at about 133 million with those pre-arbitration estimates. So let's say you sign Aaron Judge for for $36 million a year, but probably end up being more than that at this point. But let's just say 36 wouldn't probably be much higher than, I think 40 would kind of be a cap. So we're in the ballpark. But if you add that, you're already at like $169 million with just adding Aaron Judge to those estimates, about 170 million. So then they need more than just one player. I think they're looking at center field. They're looking at middle infield. Definitely have said they want to get a starting pitcher. And so, I don't know. I'm almost tempted to say $200 million. Maybe they do look to shed a salary like Tommy La Stella, and then you revert back a little bit in terms of your commitments. But if not, it's not hard for me to see them going 180, 200, or even a little beyond 200. So it'll be fascinating to see what this ends up being, but it's just hard to fathom. They're going to big game hunt and fill out all the different spots they're reportedly targeting and stay under certainly 180, but 190 even, closer to $200 million. So we'll see. They've been at about 162, according to Roster Resource on Fangraphs, each of the last several seasons. So next question. Isaac says, when do you expect Kyle Harrison to be in the league? I'm going to say May of 2023, maybe even sooner than that. I would expect in the first couple months of 2023. Assuming no injuries, assuming he continues to pitch well, I think he'll start in AAA. Bay Area Champ says, do you think the Giants are not going to sign a frontline starting pitcher and rely on Kyle Harrison making an impact? I don't, because Farhan Zaidi has said as much. He said, we have a front of the rotation arm in Carlos Rodon, who is now a free agent, and we want to go into the year with that same setup, with a kind of co-ace to pair with Logan Webb. And he was pretty clear that they want to do it from outside the organization, that there's not that kind of pressure on Kyle Harrison to be that guy. I think they want to, remain flexible in their rotation so that they can mix in Kyle Harrison early in the season, like I just predicted. But, I mean, imagine if you've got an ace, whether it's Verlander or DeGrom or something, and Logan Webb, and Alex Cobb, who is really good. You've also got Wood and DeSclafani on your roster, and then Kyle Harrison comes up and is really good. Their rotation could be elite if all goes according to plan. And basically, Farhan Zaidi said they want to add a frontline arm to pair with Logan Webb, whether it's Carlos Rodon or somebody else, but he's not talking about Kyle Harrison. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your next listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter, at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.